Hello and welcome to the world-famous and award-winning Driving You Crazy podcast. This is the show where we talk about all things transportation, anything that gets you from here to there. I'm the traffic anchor and the transportation reporter for Denver 7 News, Jason Luber. If you would like to give me a call, you sure can. The listener hotline is 303-832-0217, and all my contact information is in the description of this show. The left turn, it can be tricky, especially on busy roadways. Some drivers avoid them. Delivery companies have tried to route away from them. Traffic engineers have studied new ways to make them safer, and some people think that left turn should be eliminated altogether. Joining me now is one person who believes that should be the case, and to talk about the dangers of the left turns, it's Dr. Vikash Gayah, who has a resume that is 2 pages long, so I'll put a link to it in the description of the show. But I'll say it simply. Dr. Gayah is a professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Penn State University, where he also serves as the interim director of the Larson Transportation Institute. Dr. Gayah, thanks so much for joining me here on the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so before we get into left turns, on your X/Twitter profile, it says always hungry. So what is your favorite comfort food?
That's a great question. I love soup, and so I look forward to the fall when my wife allows me to make soup.
Yeah, soup is always a good choice, and then, of course, sourdough bread, right?
I just learned to make sourdough bread within the last couple of years, and so soup and bread, that's it, yep.
Perfect. What made you, I know you've studied this basically your entire life, what made you interested in transportation?
That's a great question. I think I took a mandatory introduction to transportation engineering class as a junior. And I was actually going to be a geotechnical engineer, soils engineer. I worked for a soils firm during my undergrad, and I just didn't realize that transportation was a field. And once I realized that, I just realized how important it is to everyone's lives. It's something that everyone has an opinion on, everyone is affected by, and it's something that I can do to make a difference.
Yeah. When it comes to getting people around a city, and as we just talked about, you have studied this for years and years, and I've studied it too, but just in a different way. But when I'm emceeing or hosting an event, giving a speech about traffic, I would say something to get to the line that 2 wrongs don't make a right. But then I would bring it back to traffic and say, even so, 3 rights make a left. I think maybe that could be the title of your memoir, 3 rights make a left.
Maybe 3 rights instead of a left. How about that?
There you go. And I think most drivers are aware that making a left is obviously more dangerous than just going straight or making a right turn, especially at large intersections that allow for higher speeds. So before you go into the dangers of the left turn, how do you feel about the pulling halfway out to make the left, or would you rather see people wait back at the stop bar before they make the left?
So I'm a driver, right? And so I'm fairly impatient sometimes, and so I pull out as well. But it is also not very safe, and so the driver has to make that determination. And that's part of the problem with the left turn is we put a lot of onus on the driver to make this decision when an incorrect decision can be catastrophic. So pulling out into the middle of the intersection, you can block the entire intersection, you can block the other traffic when they need to move. Or you can collide with another vehicle, and that's a problem.
Yeah, most definitely. So how do you feel personally about making a left? Does it make you nervous when you do it, and why should maybe drivers not be allowed to do it?
Yeah, I'm totally fine making a left. Actually, my kids now, when I make a left, sometimes they'll say, "Hey, aren't you not supposed to do that?" And it's like, guys, we're just going to go where we need to go, right? If it's done safely, it's fine. But it can be dangerous. And, as a transportation engineer, I know sort of what to look out for. So when I'm making that left turn and judging that gap, I'm also looking downstream at the pedestrians or bicyclists that might be in the way so I don't hit them. Because I know that that's a sort of a common gap that, drivers are often looking at the vehicles and sort of not paying attention to this smaller, more vulnerable population.
Right. But I would think it's more dangerous for a person when they're crossing the road for right-turning drivers to not see them, because you tend to have drivers who are making a right do a rolling right stop, and they don't really stop, and they just keep going through, not looking for pedestrians, more so than a left who would obviously is scanning the intersection, looking for cross traffic, and then would maybe be more apt to being able to see somebody that's crossing the road.
It could be. It certainly could be. But the left-turning drivers looking kind of downstream at traffic and not necessarily looking to where they are going. The right-turning vehicles, drivers are doing the same thing. They're looking all the way on the left-hand side and not in front of them where they're going. However, I think one big difference is the speeds. When you're making a right-hand turn, you are slowing down significantly. And when you are making that rolling stop, I mean, you're close to stopping. Those left-turning vehicles are accelerating through that movement. You know, you're trying to get out of the intersection, out of the way of oncoming traffic. And when a right turning vehicle strikes a pedestrian, it tends to be at very low speeds. A left turning vehicle strikes a pedestrian, it tends to be while they're accelerating.
Yeah, and then if they had to stop, a left-turning driver had to stop right away, then they're in a precarious situation, especially if they were timing out any traffic coming at them, where then that person who is who they're crossing in front of could be at risk of crashing into that person.
They're exposed, yes.
Yeah. My guest is Dr. Vikash Gayah. He's professor at Penn State University, interim director of the Larson Transportation Institute, and we're talking about prohibiting left turns at intersections, especially in urban areas. Do you think it matters that if the left turn is a protected left, like with green arrows, or any left turns at major intersections? I mean, do you think that any of the a protected left is a better idea than just an unprotected left?
So from a safety standpoint, a protected left is extremely more safe, right? It's much, much more safe because I am telling the driver that I have stopped all potential conflicts for you and you can proceed with this left turn, right? And so that's like the from a safety perspective, that's like the most perfect thing to do because I'm not letting the driver make that decision. I have made that decision. I've stopped everyone else. But from an efficiency standpoint, it's actually very inefficient because I have literally shut down this entire intersection for these few left-turning vehicles. If there's multiple through lanes, that's multiple lanes I'm stopping for one lane of left-turning vehicles, and that typically tends to be the minority movement as the left turn. And then when I add that additional protected phase, I think what many people don't know is that anytime I go from one movement to another, we go through that green, then yellow, then red. Actually, there's a period of time where every single traffic signal is red at that intersection. 1 or 2 seconds, maybe 2 to 3, 1 to 3 seconds in that range. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that happens every single time we change, right? And if I have a shorter cycle, that can be a really big chunk of the time that the intersection is just not moving vehicles, not moving people. No one is allowed to move. It's dead.
Yeah. Do you think it matters if the signal provides for a leading left or a lagging left for the safety reasons or efficiency of moving vehicles?
Honestly, I don't think for functionally, it doesn't really provide a huge difference. Leading left, lagging left, we still have the same issues. We still have the same phase changes, the same lost time. The time when the intersection is all red. Some people are more used to leading or lagging. So I think from more of like a particularly community perspective, we shouldn't be mixing like one intersection has leading, another has lagging. That just creates confusion and might actually make safety problems worse. As long as it's consistent, it doesn't matter, I think, which one we use.
Yeah. In a previous interview, I've heard you say that the inconvenience for some drivers by eliminating left turns would be offset by better traffic flow. But it seems then that you're only pushing, pardon the pun, but pushing the problem down the road because you're making that left turn, somebody making that left turn at an intersection that maybe didn't have as many left turns before, so, unless they're making the 3 rights to make a left, as we talked about earlier. So you're really now changing one left into making it a dangerous left somewhere else.
Sure, that's a really good point. So actually, what our work is really focused on is widespread implementation of left turn restrictions. You can certainly restrict left turns at a single intersection, but I'm looking at sort of a network-wide, entire downtown Denver, right? If we can restrict left turns at all locations, it's not really pushing the problem down the road. It is more, I can't make this left, so I need to find an alternative route that only involves right-hand turns. At the absolute worst case is I get to that same intersection, I cannot make a left, and I make 3 rights. So I circle the block, I travel through 4 additional signals, right? That's the worst case. Some vehicles who never had to make a left to begin with, they travel the same path, they're the same. And we've looked at it, and if, origins and destinations are more or less spatially distributed, on average, each trip would require traveling through one extra signal, just one. So I'm traveling through one extra signal on average, but at each signal, I'm waiting less, I'm stopping less, I'm spending less time stopped, I'm waiting less time. And so I end up getting to where I need to go faster.
But you're also using more fuel. I mean, if you're looking at this over a long term, and yeah, maybe not in one block, but over days and weeks and months, you're using more fuel, you have more maintenance, you're wearing out your tires more, you're wearing out your brakes more.
So great point. On the fuel, we've looked at the fuel efficiency as well, or fuel consumption. And what we found is that by restricting left turns versus allowing left turns, you can actually save fuel to the order of like 10 to 15%. And again, you're traveling longer distances, but in urban areas, what's sucking up that fuel is that deceleration and acceleration, stopping and then starting from a dead stop. That's where a lot of fuel is consumed. And so even if I'm traveling longer distances, if I'm waiting less time at each intersection or stopping less, I have a lower probability of stopping at each intersection, I can actually consume less fuel. So from a brakes perspective, it actually would be better on your brakes because I don't have to stop all the way. Engine perspective, same thing. The one part that it's not going to be great on is your tires. I have to travel that distance, and there's no good way to wrap your head around that.
Right.
Maybe that's a trade-off we're okay making.
And maybe it's a trade-off as well, depending on the type of vehicle, because as you know, with electric vehicles, they have the regenerative braking, so they can actually, with the braking, they're generating a little bit more electricity, and the electricity is used differently in those type of vehicles than it is for gasoline.
Sure. I also own an electric vehicle. I mean, I'm very much into this, right? And the one thing I would say is electric vehicles tend to actually be harsher on your tires because of the torque that exists like when you're accelerating. And so, you would put more wear and tear on your tires, and you probably have to replace your tires a little bit more often. But is it worth it for fewer fatalities, fewer crashes, and travel time savings? It might be. I just want cities to consider it.
Right. I'm speaking with Dr. Vikash Gayah. He is a professor at Penn State University in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. He's also interim director of the Larson Transportation Institute, talking about his idea to eliminate left turns at intersections. You have looked at this in other cities around the country. So where has it worked, and what has been the reaction, if you know, by the traveling public to eliminating some of these left turns?
Sure. So I know that other cities have tried it in maybe smaller scales. So, for example, San Francisco, Van Ness Avenue, they restrict left turns along that arterial during the peak periods. Washington, D.C. has recently put up dynamic signs to restrict left turns during some times of the day. Tucson has restricted left turns, right? I don't know the public reaction, but I can imagine that, initially there's going to be some discomfort or some pushback. Hey, you're taking away my freedom of a left turn, right? Like I used to be able to do this and I can't. Totally understandable. And I get that, right? But in this day and age with like your navigation systems and things like that, like they can consider that and reroute you however you need to go. And then once people get used to the fact that I'm traveling faster, I'm getting to, this trip used to take, 15 minutes and now it's 12. And I think they're going to get used to it. And we have historical evidence of similar traffic interventions where a seeming, we put a seeming like restriction on vehicles and people end up being better off and they're much happier about it.
Right. I've interviewed numerous delivery companies. They've struggled with it's the traveling salesman problem that I'm sure you have looked at as they try to route their vehicles in the most efficient way possible. Now, some have tried to make as few lefts as possible. It's less efficient, obviously, than right turns where you don't have to stop. But lefts are necessary at certain times, so eliminating all of them, you would think, would affect the efficiency model that they are trying to run and cost them in terms of their fuel and maintenance and their delivery times.
So with those, UPS, for example, has famously restricted left turns in their routing and saved something like 100,000 gallons of fuel a year. Actually, in our work, we've looked at this too from a driver, just a regular driver perspective. If it's 2 a.m, I'm sitting at an intersection, I need to make a left, right? The intersection is empty. There's no other vehicles. make a left.
Yeah.
Totally fine. There's not a lot of vehicles to conflict
As long
with.
as there's a cop not around.
No, so what we've found is we've looked at sort of the when and where as well. So, like, it started off network wide, right? But then, like, should it be all times? And the answer is no. During the off-peak times, when the network is not very busy, it's not very congested, left turns should be allowed, and we can serve them in a protected manner so it's safe. And then when the network gets more and more busy, so during the morning peak, the PM peak, the midday peak, if it's very busy, restrict left turns, and let's use up all of that intersection capacity and keep traffic moving. We've also looked at where left turns should be restricted, and that's a little bit more of a complex problem because it's a very complex combinatorial problem. Imagine if you have like an 8x8 system. That's 2 to the 64 decisions. Like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But what we found is that generally, if you restrict left turns at the busiest intersections, the ones serving the most left turns or the most vehicles, you tend to get a really big decrease in travel time by restricting those left turns at the busiest intersections.
Have you found differences in doing this left turn plan in urban areas, really densely packed urban areas, to suburban areas, to more rural parts of a state?
Yeah, so we really focused on the urban areas, like where we have like grid-like networks that are very redundant, and there's a lot of alternative routing that's available. In suburban, and also the blocks are fairly close together. In suburban areas or rural areas, if I can't make a left and I have to circle the block, that can mean traveling miles and miles out of my way. And no, that would not be an efficient strategy. That's not a strategy that I would promote. In suburban areas, maybe on some arterials, that it would be a good strategy, as long as there's a feasible way to make that left, that feasible alternative to that left. If there's an alternative route available, it's certainly a strategy that can be considered. But if there's not an alternative, a feasible alternative, that's not going to take you miles out of your way, no. In suburban areas, this is not something I would promote.
Right. I'm visiting with Dr. Vikash Gayah. He's a professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Penn State University, also the interim director of the Larson Transportation Institute, talking about eliminating left turns at intersections. And I think traffic engineers understand the same danger that you've been explaining over the last little bit. And there are ways that they're using roadway design and intersection design to try to reduce the number of potential conflict points. And that's really the problem here is conflict points between different vehicles, right? So yep. I want to get your feelings and comments about some of these intersection designs. The obvious one is the roundabout, but we all can't live in Carmel, Indiana, where there are more roundabouts there than people.
Yeah, so roundabouts are certainly a good strategy in some cases, right? You're sort of getting rid of that opposing traffic and sort of reducing the number of conflicts. The problem with roundabouts, particularly in the more urban areas, is one, it requires a spatial footprint that we just don't have in the urban areas, right? You'd have to literally raise buildings or sidewalks or something like that, and that's not ideal. The other thing is, and again, and this is relevant to the urban areas, is if you have any queue spillback, it can completely gridlock a roundabout. Roundabouts are very susceptible to gridlock. So in very, very heavy traffic, when queues of vehicles are spilling back into the roundabout shuts down. It might shut down for all vehicles because one vehicle is just hanging out there waiting, right? And then that's a whole intersection that is now stopped. Roundabouts are actually a really good idea, in my opinion, in those rural and suburban areas because you have really long block lengths, or you can have like a mile between intersections, and so there's not a lot of chance of a queue spilling back from one into the other. And they can be bigger, so they can hold more vehicles, and you have less chance of this sort of gridlock. Because if a roundabout gridlocks, it takes a long time for it to ungridlock, a long time.
Right. I have experienced that definitely in the past, but generally I'm a fan of the roundabout because it does tend to keep traffic moving. In most cases,
Sure.
rather than regular intersections. It's obviously safer, and you're not having to stop. You just slow down and just keep on going.
Sure. I actually am a big fan of roundabouts, just not in urban areas. And another reason I would say is that if I'm in an urban area and I'm traveling through 20 intersections to get to where I need to go, at every single intersection, I need to essentially slow down to a near stop with a roundabout because I need to slow down, merge into that traffic. With traditional intersections, about half of them I would have to stop. We've actually looked at this. Like if I served a downtown with all roundabouts, which may not even be possible from an infrastructure perspective, but if I could, versus the no left turns, actually the no left turns is more efficient still.
Interesting. All right, another popular one to eliminate lefts at an intersection is called the Michigan left or center left, where you pass the main intersection, then you use the left side U-turn to go the other way, and then you merge right to complete that turn, making a right to go left.
Yeah. Again, it's a really good strategy, and I think it's very appropriate in some settings. Suburban areas are a great sort of setting for that, because in order to do that in a downtown area, if I have just sort of like 2 lanes in each direction with no median, I can't make a U-turn in mid-block U-turn. There's no space to do that. So again, in urban areas, like this is kind of the setting for this particular work. A Michigan left might not be the most appropriate. In a suburban setting, actually, I think it's a really, really fine idea. Let's get rid of the left, move those conflicting vehicles out of the way, right? So we get rid of the left-turning vehicle conflict with the opposing traffic. And you just go through, make a U-turn if there's space to do that. But you need a median. You need a median for it to happen. So you need that space. If we have that space in suburban settings, we typically do have that space, and it doesn't really require a ton of additional infrastructure, like some of the more like a roundabout requires completely redesigning the intersection. A median U-turn, you might just have to have some pavement cuts into the median. I think that can be, it's just a little bit cheaper.
Right. Another one is called the full or partial continuous flow interchange. That's where you're making your left. You started actually several hundred feet back before the main intersection. So you are in this dedicated lane. All traffic has stopped coming at you. You make the left. You're in a dedicated lane. And then you're allowed to continue that left up at the intersection where it is a little bit more protected and you might feel more safe.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's another great strategy. Again, the idea is just moving the conflicts to sort of a location where it's less dangerous and it's easier or more efficient to handle. It's a good idea. Again, the problem is you need a significant amount of space. The spatial footprint required, you need very, very long blocks. This is really only feasible in sort of more suburban settings. You could not do that in downtown Denver.
Yeah, or almost on roadways that are acting as a highway, 3 lanes, higher speeds, that sort of thing.
Correct.
Yeah. Another one is called a diverging diamond, usually over a bridge, and it's where you drive on the left side, where you keep the traffic. If you're coming off an exit ramp, you would actually, instead of making the left across traffic, you're actually staying to the left, driving on the left side of the bridge, and then crossing over back to the right on the other side of the bridge.
Yeah, this is typically done at interchanges. So the diverging diamond is typically done where an interstate or an expressway or highway meets a surface street, right? And so the couple different interchange designs, a diverging diamond is one of them. It does seem to be operationally fairly efficient, reduces conflicts, and it allows that interchange to sort of move vehicles and it kind of less disruption to the surface street. I do know that in some winter weather states, the question becomes like, how do I plow that, right? Because
Right.
It wasn't a concern for me when I first saw it from an operational perspective, but from a more practical perspective, like, yeah, that's a great question. Like that is going to be, when you have heavy snow, like that actually could be an issue. But a very nice operational, design, particularly for that interchange setting.
Well, it's very popular out here. We've already had another one built, and we're going to have another one built as well as a quadrant road. And I don't know if you heard of quadrant roads, where basically a square, and this is where you'll need obviously more space, but a square is built near the main intersection that you want to remove these lefts from, and that's what you use to facilitate the left turns by diverting traffic to this quadrant area, this quadrant road, and having drivers make their turns there where traffic is going to be lighter, slower, away from the more typically larger, faster moving roadway.
Yeah, I think it's also called like a jug handle. I mean, it's very popular, particularly in suburban settings. New Jersey uses them a lot. I do remember the first time I drove through one, I said, man, we can't make a left here. I was really annoyed by it. And then my wife said, like, aren't you the guy that wants to get rid of these left turns? I'm like, yeah, but not here, No, if you have the space for it, it's certainly a nice solution. And it's a nicer solution than some of these other types, like the continuous flow or things like that, because that's actually a lot of infrastructure. And you can imagine as a driver a lot more confusing potentially than the jug handle, which is just just some instructions. You're making a left, go here. If you miss it, like you can figure that out.
Right. They're still in the planning phases here. They do have the available land to create this quadrant road, so it'll be interesting to see how this city develops that as we go forward. Another one is called the Single Point Urban Interchange, or SPUI for short. Is one of my favorite words I love saying on TV, and I say it as much as I can. Many times they're at a highway exit. They allow for basically angled lefts at a single point, usually under the bridge, where the two directions go at the same time, eliminating some of the conflict points. But for me, you're almost putting, because you're having traffic going at the same time at a really steep angle, almost right at each other.
Yeah, no, it could be very confusing as well. I haven't really studied this particularly on my own, so I can't comment too much from like a transportation engineering perspective, but I can say from a driver perspective, I don't like it. It just seems it's uncomfortable to sort of be making that movement while staring down oncoming traffic. And if someone makes a mistake, that's catastrophic.
Yep. This one is not actually a roadway design, but I think it's the most dangerous kind of left. And I'm not sure if you've heard about it or come across this one. It's called the Pittsburgh left, where a driver usually, I see you, I see you giggling, so you probably know about the Pittsburgh left, but I'll describe it for the people who don't know it. It's where you come up to, usually it's a one-way each way street. You're the first person in line at the traffic light. Somebody is going to come the other way, and as soon as that light turns green, boom, you punch it to make that left in front of the driver before they start going straight. And it's so common in Pittsburgh that driver that's going to go straight waits a beat or two because they know somebody's going to cut in front of them.
Yeah, so my understanding is, I'm at Penn State, so I visit Pittsburgh often. My understanding is that the Pittsburgh left can only be given, never taken. And so that through-moving driver typically flashes the lights or indicates in some way, makes eye contact with the left-turning vehicle to say, I see you, you go ahead. It should never be taken. So if I'm sitting there and I don't have any indication from that through driver, I haven't looked that person in the eye, I haven't seen them flash their lights, I should not be, hitting the gas and pulling out in front of them. And that's one thing where, if both drivers are involved and active in it and are aware of it, it could be very safe. It's just a way to sneak one more left turn in, right? Totally fine. It makes sense. If there's a miscommunication, if I don't know about it and I'm the left turning vehicle and you're giving it to me and I'm just waiting there, people are going to get annoyed. Like, what is this guy doing? Right. So that's a potential problem. Or if I think that you scratched your ear and I say, oh, that's the signal, and I gun it and then you hit me, it's my fault, right? So any miscommunication can lead to catastrophic outcomes. However, it is very common, and in driving through Pittsburgh, you see it a lot, and actually it works.
Yeah, but the Pittsburgh left shows there are regional differences in driving behavior. So have you looked at some of those regional differences about how some cities or states handle these type of driving issues, even, maybe even in different countries, how they handle these kind of issues?
We've looked at different sort of rules. We haven't looked at sort of regional behavioral differences, but we've looked at different rules. Like, for example, the strategy that I'm proposing in downtowns, if I can't make lefts, I have to make a lot more rights, right? Well, what happens if I'm in a place where there's no right turn on red? Like, is that going to be catastrophic? And we've looked at things like that. Or what if there's a lot of pedestrians? So when I'm making those rights, there's a lot more pedestrian right turning, and you alluded to this, right turning pedestrian conflicts. Mm-hmm. Just the presence of those pedestrians, can they block up all the rights? And then all of a sudden, like, I'm doubling or tripling the number of right turns, and we can't accommodate. We've looked at things like that and found that the strategy is fairly robust, and it works if there's no right turn on red, or it works if there's a high volume of pedestrians. But we've tested this a lot in like a simulation environment. We want to get out there and implement it.
Yeah, and there are some regional differences with left on red, because I know here in Colorado, it's legal to make a left on red as long as you're going from a one-way to another one-way, so it's usually done only in downtown Denver. There are some other downtowns around the state that would allow it, but so that's another left that would be restricted to, where you make a left on red because it could keep traffic flowing.
Sure, yeah. But if it's two one-way streets, a left turn is the same as a right turn. There's no big conflict. It's the exact same as a right. There's from a opposing vehicle standpoint. If I have two traffic streams, making a left, it's the exact same as a right. So that seems like a very reasonable strategy. I do know that other places have also tried things like flashing yellow. So it's, just different strategy to just kind of to make the left turn. But what this tells me is it's a hard problem from a traffic engineering perspective. It's actually the left turn is the hardest piece. It drives signal timing design. It drives intersection design. It drives a lot of things. And it's also very dangerous. And so, hey, if it's a downtown area and I have short blocks that I can, make that circling the block and it's not too bad, let's just get rid of it and save ourselves the trouble.
So do you go out, as I'm speaking to Dr. Vikash Gayah, professor at Penn State University, about eliminating left turns, talk to other traffic engineers and in cities and states and counties and promote your idea, or do they contact you, and how do those conversations flow?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, honestly, part of why I'm doing this is to get people to hear about the idea and hopefully be more open to trying it. I think it's one of those things. I mean, I've presented in front of PennDOT, for example, and it's one of those things that everyone says, that makes a lot of sense. And then it just sort of stops there. And I think a part of the problem is, if you're the first to try something and it works really well, great. It works really well. And you as the person who implemented it, your day goes on. But if you're the first person to try it and it doesn't work well, you might be fired. And so, there's a lot of there's always some friction or inertia to new ideas, right? And this one is a little bit radical. It's not it's radical and not, right? Restrict left turn at individual intersection. Hey, we can try it, right? But doing this sort of like downtown wide or something like that, that's a big change. And I do think at the very beginning, drivers who are used to making lefts, they're going to be like, hey, I used to be able to do this. I can't anymore. I'm not happy about it, right? Or, I think I said the freedom to make a left, you took that away from me, right? Yes, but try it. Give it a shot. And it's one of those things that I think will have to be implemented for some time for the benefits to sort of be realized or internalized. Maybe not realized, internalized.
And I know we have a few minutes left, and separately from the left turning issue, I know you study all kinds of other transportation issues and theories. And about 15 years ago, I saw one of the papers that you published, a research paper, and it was titled Macroscopic Relations of Urban Traffic Variables, where you researched the average traffic flow and average density within a certain urban networks. And while I'm not going to ask you to revisit all that data here, it did strike me that if you had waited until now to do that research, imagine how using AI could have helped in modeling all that data.
Sure. Yeah. No. It's. I mean, AI is just revolutionizing a lot of fields, right? And so I think our jobs are how do we use this in a smarter way? I'll tell you this: even the left turn idea. I mentioned to you, if I have a city with 8 blocks by 8 blocks, that's 64 intersections, right? What's the best configuration of, let's say, left turns or something else? I want to implement something, right, at each of those intersections. Well, I can either do it or not. There's 2 to the 64 combinations. I don't know what that number is, but it's too big for me to say, right? It's a huge number. Right. How do we can't test all of those configurations. So this is an opportunity. We can leverage AI and some of these other strategies to help us. And actually, that's one of the things that we're going to do now is with this left turn idea of where to implement left turns. We're going to look at, well, we've tried some more statistical or optimization ways. Let's just feed it to the AI monster and see what it says and see if it matches what we've come up with.
But your calculation is only as good as the weather and the road conditions and construction and incidents and all these other issues that might and obviously do creep up in any area, even if it is just, 8 blocks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How do you think AI is going to be helping otherwise in developing traffic flow? Because I've talked to one company who is really into trying to use AI with traffic signals and then make them a smart traffic signal and then hook up the traffic signal to be able to talk to, let's say, first responders who might be coming through that area. So instead of just the strobe light that the signal can pick up and then turns it to green, that traffic signal already knows 1 or 2 or 3 minutes ahead of time that the fire trucks are on the way and can clear the queue and then get them through there faster.
Yeah, I mean, I think with related to that, a lot of my work is also in traffic signal timing and different different strategies for that. And one of the things I think AI can help with is I think all of our current paradigms for traffic signals are very reactive. Something happens, we react to it. I do think where AI can help is we can be very proactive. We can sort of try to have a better job of predicting what's going to happen. And so using that information or advanced knowledge or advanced prediction and sort of moving towards a situation that might be better 5 minutes from now, as opposed to reacting 5 minutes after something has happened.
Right. And being the traffic expert that you are, there's a major push to go autonomous. And there are some systems that are close, and they have some concerns. They're mostly in the warm weather states, down in Arizona, in California, where they have good weather. None are out here where they can get hit by a May snowstorm, as we've seen the last couple of weeks. How do you see autonomous vehicles moving forward in the short term, even in the next 5 to 10 years or the next 25 to 30 years?
Yeah, I think right now we're still in sort of, even though they're on the road, we're still in sort of the pilot testing mode, right? Like it works in synthetic cases, nice weather, places that are mapped out really well. Like I was in Phoenix, I took a Waymo vehicle, it had no driver in it. I took it as if it was a cab. It was kind of cool. It was a novelty. But there's a lot of like real world things that we still have to work out, right? In cold weather states like Colorado or Pennsylvania, we're ripping up our lane lines, our lane markers every year with snowplows, right? And so like when that doesn't exist, like what do these autonomous vehicles do? They really struggle actually. The weather conditions, and there are always going to be situations where we can't really predict these. I think humans in general, we problem solve, in a large event, you're leaving a concert or something like that. A traffic pattern emerges where people just sort of like turn take or and it's not always one-to-one, but just like this pattern emerges where the drivers just sort of figure things out. And the AI is sort of bound to these rules and past experiences that if it hasn't experienced that yet, it might not be able to solve that unseen situation. And so I do think it's gonna get better, and it'll get better rapidly. It's really a level of public trust. There's certainly cases where it's super helpful. Like if I was driving, I think AI is perfect, or autonomous vehicles are perfect for like, I'm driving on a highway. I'm driving from State College, where I live, to DC. I do that fairly often. 3 hours of that is on the freeway. And it's just going straight and staying within the lines and making sure I don't hit what's in front of me. Great, turn that machine on and let it go. But when I get to DC and I have to deal with the pedestrians and the bicyclists and these unforeseen things that are happening, like I think we need the driver to kind of pay attention and really focus on that. And we might get there someday. It actually worries me because I'm not sure, my children, I don't know if they'll get a driver's license or if their driver's license will be, can you push the button or not,
Right.
But it does concern me. I think hopefully there's going to be a medium here where, the autonomous part of the vehicle can handle the more monotonous tasks. And then we take over when it's, critical, mission critical.
But then there's that major issue, which is liability. So who's responsible for a crash, or worse, if somebody gets hit or killed? The operating company, the car maker, the software company, the internet connectivity, the inadequate infrastructure. So a city, I mean, all of that has to probably be solved, and because you have tort laws that are different from state to state. All of that has to be probably solved before you have widespread autonomy.
Likely, likely that's true. And I guess from my perspective, one of the things that I don't really like is, as a researcher, we take very much care and precautions when we design an experiment and we do it, right? We have to get a lot of buy-in, and the people who are participating have to agree. Unfortunately, if I drive in Pittsburgh, I'm agreeing to be a part of an autonomous vehicle experiment for a company because they're just there, right? And that does bother me a little bit. From a liability perspective, I think Cruise was the company that did have a crash, and I don't think they exist anymore. And I think part of the reason is these sort of legal type reasons. I mean, that's not my area of expertise, right? But just as a person, I can see that, yeah, that's going to be a huge stumbling block. That being said, there is the potential for it to do a lot of good, right? There are semi-autonomous features in vehicles, and we can solve that, and that's great. The onus is on the driver. I think the onus is always going to be on the driver, and it should be. And that's the only way to keep the driver engaged.
Yeah, but I don't know, and maybe you have seen that movie I, Robot with Will Smith, where a robot had to make a choice between saving him or saving a little girl, and the likelihood of a better outcome was to save him. And so the little girl died. But an AI or some computer system in a vehicle could be, let's say it's talking to a bus full of school kids that are both on an icy road, and then they start to slide a little bit through no fault of their own. And the AIs could determine, well, the bus is going to kill this person, but save that bus full of kids, So those kind of ethical questions are going to be interesting to think about as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have those as drivers, we have those as people, and it's only going to get more complicated. I completely agree.
Exactly. Well, I know we just have a few minutes left here. So what is your next transportation topic on your research horizon? What else are you working on? Or are you going to really just push on the left turn thing?
I mean, I do a lot of work in transportation safety as well. And on the safety side, we really look at trying to identify what sort of roadway countermeasures are actually making a difference in reducing crashes, reducing fatalities. And so one of the things we recently conducted a study for PennDOT where we looked at high friction surface treatment, which is just an additional layer of sort of binding and epoxy that we put down on the roads, on curves. And it turns out, they were asking us like, is this beneficial? And the answer is like 100% yes. We should be putting this everywhere because it just reduces crashes and bad weather. So that's one of the things that we're kind of looking at more and just kind of trying to study. And then the other thing is I've gotten more and more interested in sort of vulnerable road user safety, pedestrian and bicyclists. Part of the reason is I started biking to work. I bike 7 miles each way when I bike to work. It's I think transportation engineers, people who work in traffic, should be required to walk and bike. And I think you get a whole new appreciation for what's important from a transportation engineering perspective.
And speaking of that, do you believe that it's then safer to maybe close off urban areas? I mean, forget about the left turns, just keep all the cars out and just allow for scooters and bike riders and walkers to be especially an urban core?
If I had my way, absolutely. Let's do that.
Interesting. Well, hey, I thank you so much for your time. It's been a fascinating conversation, and all the best.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And I will put all of Dr. Gayah's information, his contact information there at Penn State in the description of this show. It's an interesting idea to eliminate left turns. I don't know if it would work altogether, but he's studying it, and I'm just talking about it. So I'll leave it up to the experts. But obviously, left turns are dangerous. Obviously, left turns can slow down traffic, and as we just pointed out, so it will be interesting to see how many cities he can convince to incorporate his idea to maybe eliminate some left turns, and we'll hopefully get some traffic to flow better and more efficiently. So, again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns about this or anything, you can always send me or get a hold of me on any of my contact links in the description of this show, or call that listener hotline at 303-832-0217. Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I'm Jason Luber, the traffic guy. Be safe, and as always, happy motoring.